across the various platforms of social media, we keep on being asked a lot of questions. Sometimes we're able to answer them straight away, but other people may not see those answers. So we've decided that this time at Christmas, we'll do a roundup and I will go through the answers that we have given because it may be something that you are interested in. So with epimediums, there are 3 different types. There are those which are deciduous, so they lose their leaves and you don't have to worry about doing anything to those at all. And then there are the totally evergreen ones and the ones which are semi-evergreen. Both of these keep their foliage in a different state right the way through the winter. The ones which are semi-evergreen, the leaf goes a beautiful colour in the autumn and then it stays with its brown russety colours right the way through into the spring, and the evergreen ones stay green right the way through. Now what you want to do is you want to be able to see their beautiful flower, and they flower fantastically for us here in the UK somewhere between February, March, maybe into April. So you want to see that, and if their leaf is like this and their flowers trying to push up through it, it doesn't look very good. So what I say to everybody, and this is with the evergreen ones as well, 1st of February, go out to your epimediums with a set of shears and cut them down to about this, which is about 3 or 4 centimetres from ground level. And then you will get to see the beauty of all the flowers coming through right the way through into the spring. And you'll also see the fantastic new foliage, because that is just as beautiful as the flowers are. Nerim Boudinii are one of these plants whereby the bud for the following year is actually produced in the season beforehand. So if they haven't grown very well or they're very young plants, then they may not flower one year. The other thing is that sometimes people have got them planted a little bit too deep. They want to be so that the neck of the actual bulb plus half the bulb is sitting out off the surface of the compost, and that is quite important. They can be grown either in a border or against walls or something like that because they get extra warmth there. They like a sunny site, quite free draining, and just remember, don't keep on splitting them up once they look as though they're quite congested, because they produce a bud the previous year and then they flower the next year. High potash feed is also something that will help. Anemia frilly knickers are a brilliant new plant that we've introduced. Flowers really well. Now it is grown in a container, therefore it can be planted at any time of the year. However, I would resist planting in the middle of the summer when it's really hot. Best times of year, because it is basically a later season flowering plant, then you plant it in the spring. That would be my recommendation. But if you happen to have a spot and you know that it's going somewhere semi-shady, which is what it likes, and you know that you can water it, don't overwater obviously, then most of the time in the year you can put it in. So late autumn, spring, best times. If you're going to put anemone frilly knickers into a container, make sure the container is big enough, make sure that it doesn't get too wet, that's another thing, and also that it isn't in full sun and it's really quite hot. Those are the things that you need to consider, because anemone frilly knickers is a plant that likes a part shady environment. It wants to be moist but not over wet, and don't plant it too deep when you transfer it into another container, but it should be perfectly okay grown in a container. There we go. Merry Christmas, everyone. It's Christmas. You've got to have a bit of a fun and have a little tipple. Crocosmia Firestarters are a new variety. So if you've got them in the garden and they're growing nicely, then the time for splitting those is either in the autumn, but I prefer if you split Crocosmia in the spring, because they have corms and those corms sit on top of each other and they become a little bit like a necklace. So it's quite easy to split them and individually take them all down. Not all of those corms are going to grow. So if you do it in the spring where you can just see a small amount of green coming out of the top of the corms, you know which are the ones which are going to grow, and you need to leave them attached to 2 or 3 other corms because those are their food resource to get them going in the spring before they put their roots down. So definitely I would say probably it's difficult, isn't it, because the seasons change, but I would say mid-March is about the best time to be lifting them. You can see where they're growing, split them up, put them into some well-prepared soil with some garden compost, and hey presto, they'll go away and grow really nicely for you. Sterile plants are, people have a lot of different views on these. A sterile plant cannot produce any seed. Doesn't mean to say that it doesn't produce pollen, doesn't mean that it doesn't have any nectar. So it is perfectly able to feed insects and keep them going. So if you are somebody who doesn't want things self-seeding all over the place, then you're much happier with a sterile plant. It will still be something that the butterflies will come to, the bees will come to, other insects will come to. So don't worry too much about that fact. They still produce some pollen, they still produce some nectar, and that is the food for the insects. If you have one corm of a plant and it's supposed to be Lucifer or it's supposed to be another variety, they should not change. The only thing that can happen is maybe there's been a bit of seed, because Lucifer does produce its own seed, and maybe there is a seedling that's gone in there. Or the other thing that can cause flower colour to change is that there is a virus in the actual plant itself, and a virus will change the leaf. It may also change the colour of the flower, and if that's the case, then you need to lift and destroy that plant and start again. Cuttings from Gora is very, very easy. Nice soft tip cuttings, usually from the base when the plant is starting to grow up really nice and freshly in the spring. Soft tip cuttings, really easy to do. Have a look at my video on Gora, it will tell you exactly how to do it. Gora are brilliant in containers, and yes, you can leave them in those containers, but just make sure the container is somewhere slightly out of all of the wet weather. They will survive perfectly well. You need to leave the top growth there, and then in about end of March, cut that down to about this height, and then put the pot somewhere where you're not going to see it, and it will come back through. But don't let those pots get soaking wet. They won't like that. They can't swim. Gora, if they produce seed, it won't be true to type unless you've got the species. So say you've got straight Gora lindheimeri, then yes, it will produce Gora lindheimeri seedlings. If you've got other varieties and they do produce seed, you'll get a variant of different colours, different sizes of plants. Some will be straggly, some will be really, really good. They can sell seed around a plant, but usually you have to take the seed yourself and you have to set it in a pot or seed tray and then grow it on that way. Right, so salvia hot lips can get really quite large, and it's not advisable to leave it up at full height because you get some very straggly growth. So basically you want to cut it to half height for the winter, then in the spring you tidy it up and make it into a good shape, and then it will go on and it will look really good. I mean, they can take, can get quite tall, but just be very, very careful that you do pruning on them, because if you don't prune them, they'll just put growth on the top and then they get straggly and they don't look as good. Bulb lasagna, really brilliant way of doing your pots and having your tulips coming up and looking really fantastic. It is never a good idea to leave them in the container and expect to get a good display the second time. It doesn't really work. You'd be better off tipping those ones out, putting them into a border somewhere, and then starting fresh. It's always newly potted tulips in containers that look fantastic and give a really good show. It's been really quite funny. I mean, I have a couple of pairs of these, and it's brilliant because they have this popper and they come out. They're actually a New Zealand product, and these ones are called possum palms, and they really protect you on the back. They keep your wrist really nice and warm, and then they keep the main bit of the warm and leave your fingers able to use and work properly. Rather than having sort of fingerless mitts, which would go up to here. So I like them. I think they're brilliant. They're made from possum skin, which is a byproduct, because possum are a pest in New Zealand, and so you will get possum jumpers where they've gone and spun all the hair out, and then you get the skins like this. And a natural product like this is really good. So these are my newer pair. My older pair, which are the ones that you will have seen in the videos, the same thing. They're brilliant. They come. They aren't cheap, I have to say, but look up possum palm or look on the New Zealand possum websites. Just be careful what you put in there, because you do get some very weird ones coming out. But these are great product for people who get cold hands. So hopefully that has answered some of the questions. If you have more questions as you're going through and looking at the videos, do go back and look at them. There's a lot of tips there. Hopefully, we'll be going on and doing some more. People who've asked me about epimedium, we will be doing a specific one on epimedium in the spring to show you exactly what to do, how to look after them, and what to do. So Merry Christmas, everybody.